Welcome to The Genius Vets Show for veterinary practice owners and industry pros. At Genius Vets, it's our mission to help veterinary practices thrive, and this webinar and podcast supports that mission by giving a platform to the best and brightest minds in the veterinary industry, where we identify challenges facing veterinary practices today, and discussing ideas, insights, and solutions that practice owners need to know about. If you like today's show, that's something we'd love to know. Feel free to send an email to genius@geniusvets.com. And make sure to check out the wealth of resources available to veterinary practices at geniusvets.com/pro. That's geniusvets.com/pro. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Genius Vets Show for veterinary practice owners and industry pros. I'm your host, David Hall, co-founder here at Genius Vets. And today we're going to be continuing to explore the trends, the threats, the opportunities that are facing veterinary practice ownership. And we have an outstanding guest today. We have Dr. Robert Gribble, the owner of 3 practices in Texas. You can find Dr. Gribble at vetsofeasttexas.com. Dr. Gribble has been a speaker. He has so much to teach that we're going to talk about how he's blown the lid off of independent or individual veterinary production in his practice. So many amazing lessons. And when he does speak, I've seen rooms of veterinary practice owners just taking notes and enthralled and hanging on his every word. So very happy to have Dr. Gribble joining us today. Dr. Gribble, thanks so much for taking some time out of your extremely busy schedule to join us on the Genius Vets Show.
I appreciate you having me, David. Definitely looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. To start off, just to give people some familiarity, some context for your personal journey, what's gotten you to the level that you're working at today, where you're able to speak from. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey from where you started in veterinary to, getting to the point where you're sitting on 3 practices, very successful practices that you own and are growing. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'll start from the beginning. I'll say one thing that I think benefited me in my practice, habits and my practice philosophy are the first day I ever worked in a veterinary practice, I was a veterinarian. So I never worked in a practice. I was never a kennel guy. I was never a technician. First day I worked in a veterinary practice, I was a veterinarian. And the only idea I had of what a veterinary practice should be was from Dr. Dennis McKernan, who was a practice management guru that was the director of clinics at LSU when I was there. He had instilled me, this is what a practice should be doing and how they should be doing it. And when I walked into my first practice, I started learning immediately what not to do. And because it was so far from the ideal practice, which Dr. McKernan had taught me, and reality practice, which is what I walked into on day one. And I will say I learned some things not to do in that first practice. And the second practice I went to work for, I learned a lot of good things. Dr. Keith Sadoff down in Rose Hill, Texas, great practice owner, great practice manager, had a great practice manager working there with us. So I kind of went from learning what not to do in real practice to what to do. And then after that, I bought my first practice. And since then, I've just been toiling along like the rest of us.
It's funny you say it because I've consistently been taught throughout my life from some of my best mentors, some of the most important decisions you make is what not to do, right?
Yeah.
That's a great foundation, right there. When did you open your first practice?
So I bought my first practice 2 years out of school in 1999. And that practice was over in White House, Texas, south of Tyler. And I owned that practice from 99 to 04. And in the middle of that, I bought another practice in 01. And that is the Vet on West Main, which I still own today.
Vet on West Main. You have the Vet on West Main in Hallsville,
You have the Vet on 4th in Longview, Texas, and then the newest one, Vet on Broadway in Tyler. Tell us a
Correct.
little bit about how that's going.
So we just opened it up. There's an associate partner in that practice who was a high producing partner in our Longview practice and wanted to be an owner. And so we found a new market to put her in and opened that practice January the 1st. And it's been doing very well. We're happy. We've had both those practices, Longview and Tyler, are extended hour practices. So 10 in the morning to 10 at night, doctor's hours. So we see a lot of urgent care, but we also do wellness every day. And if you want your wellness done at 9 o'clock at night, we can do that too.
Right. Sometimes with schedules, I mean, that's the only option, right? You're busy, job, parent, all the stuff, fitting it all in. That's fantastic. What would you say so far has, and this is a new practice open in the beginning of the year, so early days. What lessons do you think have been the most impactful from your previous journey, opening, starting, managing, running practices that have made this third one maybe easier, smoother, better, that you think are things that can be replicated by others?
When you're looking at a brand new practice, you're going to be looking at exponential growth, and knowing how to staff for exponential growth is, I think, a learned behavior unless you've done it before, because you can overstaff and expect more growth than you get, or you can understaff and have way more growth than you expected. So that's kind of a fine tuning type thing to know how many people you need there based on how much you're going to grow, not only this month, but this week. When you open a practice like that the growth is just ridiculous. So you'll go from doing 3 appointments today. Next week, you're doing 8 appointments, and the next week you're doing 12 appointments. So, that type of growth is hard to staff, but having done it once in the practice in Longview, I think we've got a little better understanding of how many people we're going to need there and what our actual growth rate is going to look like.
Are you looking at those projections for what you're doing and projecting, to make those decisions a month out, 3 months out, a year out? How far are you, trying to?
The new practice 2 weeks out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just moving so fast.
We're going to need somebody 2 weeks from now. We need to hire them today so they'll be prepared to actually handle a client in 2 weeks.
Right. Would you say, because certainly you got some economies of scale of, so to speak, of systems and things that you've done at your other practice that you've spent years dialing in, that likely, translate to a large extent. I'm sure there's things that are unique and that you have to just cross the, the same unique bridge with every practice you own. But other things like, training systems, things that you have in place in order to be able to, you're talking about staffing. So just even HR systems that you bring people in, going through the hiring process, and then, onboarding and training and all of that. Is that stuff you find that you're having to tweak for your new location at all, or are you going kind of plug and play your playbooks from the previous?
Well, of course, we try to plug and play because that'd be the easiest. And maybe 90% of the things you can plug and play and move on. But that 10% that's a little bit specific to the Tyler market or specific to the Tyler staff, those type of things. Maybe a staff member has a scheduling conflict because of children or because of doing anything. But for the most part, 90%, you can plug and play. I mean, like a protocol book, we didn't have to make a new protocol book. We just copied and pasted. And so those things are definitely helpful.
Yeah. How much are you looking for your practices from one to another to be, and you're 90%, you say, and that's exactly what was going to be my follow-up question, was how much, of that. So you're saying about 90% is likely to be about the same. 10% is going to be unique based on the market or the staff or, things like that. How much are you able to really manage these, bring the staff together or manage them, concurrently? Just look at them as one entity as opposed to, do you have them structured all as separate entities? I mean, they're on the same website, but that doesn't mean anything towards the business entities themselves. You indicated that the new one has another partner, the associate vet, to some degree that may not be in the others. How do you manage that kind of complexity going as one doctor who seems to be building an empire?
I'd say that's probably a grandiose term, an empire.
A little bit. That's fun.
But the two practices in Longview and Tyler they are very similar. They have extended hours, they're open 7 days a week. There's a lot of staff. So those two practices, a lot of things cross over. We did this in Longview, let's do it in Tyler, but back and forth. And my Hallsville practice is what I would consider a day practice. It's only open Monday through Friday. So a lot more wellness going on in Hallsville and a lot more illness and injury going on in Longview and Tyler.
Wow,
so a little different staff, a little different mentality in our Hallsville practice. So a lot of those clients in the Hallsville practice, which is more wellness than illness, are repeat clients over and over. Now, a lot of times if you got it extended hours, you see urgent cases from practices all across the city, and that might be the last time you see them. However, when I go in and they go, well, we need to talk to our regular vet about this, then my next statement is, I am your regular vet now. You forget that guy.
It's interesting because I like that we when we're working with practices that are certainly, if they're focused on being specialty and emergency, that referral business is so critically important that they want to go to great lengths to try and massage the referring clinics in the area that, hey, we're going to send them back. And then we have some other clients that started more general practice and are started specialty and getting into more general practice. And so now they actually want to switch to hanging on to those clients, and that sort of thing. It's a really interesting dynamic that you're saying you want to confront that head on and say, hey, we got the extended hours essentially to be the only ones open, but we want to keep that business. What else are you doing aside from just telling them in the exam room, hitting that head on, hey, I am your regular vet now, you stay with me? What else do you do in the follow-up to try and, keep that business?
We definitely have that conversation. You're here tonight for, say, a urinary tract infection that you noticed at 8 o'clock at night. I want you to know when we get over this urinary tract infection and you need something else that's wellness oriented, vaccines or blood work or preventative, we're here. We're here until 10 o'clock every night if you want to get that done. And a lot of people are happy about that. And I will say this about the pet owning population. A lot of times that dog that showed up for a urinary tract infection at 8 o'clock at night hasn't been to another vet in 4 or 5 years. So they have no vet.
Yeah,
So
that's 70% of the population. It seems
right.
according to the studies I've seen, 70% of the population does not take their pet to the vet on a regular basis. So that's the access to care. Not that access isn't available, but it's not being taken advantage of by the majority. And so it's certainly a message that we're pumping as hard as we can from every channel that we possibly can to the public from Genius Vets, that people need to really understand a lot more the importance of having a veterinarian as the go-to pet information resource.
And that conversation we have, okay, you're here tonight for a urinary tract infection. When we're over that, we have a list on the wall in every exam room. These are the things that need to be done to help your pet live longer. So once we're over this, we need to do the preventative stuff, and we're available to do that too.
Yeah. What do you do in terms of active follow-up with those people after they leave?
So we try to book recheck appointments. We want to check this urine in 2 weeks, make sure everything looks good.
So you're forward booking before they leave?
Correct. And we do that more in our Hallsville practice, which is more wellness, and our Tyler practice, which is a new practice. Now, one thing that discourages me, if I show up one day and I've got 20 recheck appointments on the books, my first thought is we're not going to be very productive today. A lot of times they'll say, when do you want to recheck this dog? And I'll say, if he's not better, then I want to recheck him. And, because if you start eating up your appointment schedule with rechecks, man, that really knocks a big dent in your daily production.
Yeah. Are you utilizing telemedicine at all for telehealth platforms or anything like that? Any version of that for rechecks?
Any version of what?
Any version of telehealth?
No. In fact, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a telehealth talk at a big conference, and they were talking about charging, I don't know, 60, $80 for a 15-minute phone consultation. And if I have my associates on the phone for 15 minutes and I made 60 or $80, I just took a big hit right there. So there's no way we're going to go to telehealth, because, we're doing production of 11 or 12 or $1,300 an hour. Why would I take 15 minutes out of that to make $60?
Yeah. That's definitely what I want to get to. So you're hinting, you're foreshadowing at an area that I really want to spend some time talking with you. And I'll introduce to everybody. So Dr. Gribble was a participant in a survey that we at Genius Vets put out a little bit earlier in the year, and that we are, refreshing now all the time. We asked practice owners, top performing, who we identified as top performing practice owners across the nation, to tell us what they thought the trends, the threats, and the opportunities were that veterinary practice owners, that ownership is facing today. And so in each one of those areas, Dr. Gribble offered responses that were short and concise, but that really spoke to what I think are some of the most important topics within these categories. So Dr. Gribble, when you talked about trends, what trends do you see? You said, basically spoke to visit count. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What you think the trend is that's going on in visit count right now?
Yeah, so visit count or invoice count across the country since 2023, I'll say COVID versus post-COVID, invoice counts have been trending either flat or down in a lot of places. And just about everywhere I go speak, I'll look on VetWatch, vetwatch.com, and you can look at those invoice counts for each particular area you're in, and it dials down pretty close to cities. And with the exception of maybe one or two, most of them have been in the negative invoice count for 23. Part of 24, I've seen those invoice counts peaking up in March and April and May, getting above zero as far as growth rate. But for the most part, flat or negative for over a year in most places. And I think I've heard some explanations from different people, theories of why that is and how COVID played a role in it. And everybody was getting a dog and bringing them in during COVID. And now they're falling back into that population of 70% that just doesn't bring their dog to the vet anymore. Mm-hmm. So invoice counts, anything you can do to drive invoice counts is something you want to invest in heavily, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes about the threats, what do you think the threats are facing practice ownership? You said, talked about the economy and a shortfall of expendable income, which I think also, point to the trend that you're talking about. Would you expand on that a little bit? What are your thoughts currently on economy and the trend of expendable income?
Yeah, well, that's what veterinarians live on, is expendable income. I mean, that is where our money comes from. And when that pool of expendable income gets smaller, then the pool of our income gets smaller. And I think the economy plays a huge role in it, but because everyone goes to the grocery store and everyone knows that that same basket of groceries you got today cost you about 15 to 20% more than it did 2 or 3 years ago. And what does that leave in your pocket in case your dog does need some wellness? And we talk about wellness, that 70% that doesn't bring your dog in anyway. Well, that number is going to get bigger as the dollars in our owners' pockets get smaller. So they may show up for an urgent care because dog or cat is sick. But unless they have to spend that money, they're just kind of holding on to it because it's not as much as they're used to having in their pocket.
Yeah. What do you see as, from your opinion and, extremely informed perspective on the topic, what do you see as, levers that veterinary, practices can pull to try and offset that imbalance of, less expendable income? How can we get, what are your thoughts on driving more business, into the practice?
Well, one thing, and I think it's not my theory, but for a long time, the theory has been as our prices go up as veterinarians and the cost of care goes up, you got to provide additional options for paying for that. Now, I think I've seen on the news how credit card debt is rising in America as that cash in their pocket gets lower, the debt on their card gets higher. And, maybe that's something like Care Credit or Scratch Pay. Offering alternatives to paying cash is very important. And I haven't looked at our trends, but now that you and I are talking, I probably will go look and see how much of a percentage of our income in 23 was Care Credit versus 24 and versus 22, and see if that number itself is rising in our practice. My gut feeling, and I always say when I make a guess, I tell you it's a guess. This would be a 100% guess. My gut feeling would be it's probably going to be higher.
Well, one thing I can definitely tell you, just a bit from my interactions with Care Credit as an industry vendor, someone who has supported our events and, supported some of the things that we've done this year as opposed to previous years. For instance, Care Credit was one of the supporters, sponsors of our veterinary practice ownership symposium earlier in the year in Las Vegas. That was a very successful event. And I know that they're seeing these trends and they're going, there's a growth year for Care Credit. Like this is, you're definitely onto something that they're feeling and seeing and believe in and looking to support. Because a lot more people need that. What are your thoughts on insurance? Pet insurance and the role that might play in making stuff more affordable.
I would love to see more pets insured. I think it's about 2 or 3% of the population right now.
That's the estimate is 3%. And I know, every time I hear veterinary practice owners voice, weariness about insurance, because certainly nobody wants to see pet insurance and pet medicine go the way veterinary medicine go the way that human medicine has, where it's really insurance companies dictating what doctors can recommend. Because if the insurance company's not going to pay for it, it's not going to end up happening. So what's the point? But I think offsetting that in human medicine, I don't know what the exact number is, but the vast majority of everybody has insurance. And in pet, it's 3%. So I don't think that even gets on the table till it's the majority of pet owners. And I don't think that that's something that is ever going to happen. But if it gets to 30%, 40%, then a lot more people would be able to afford care, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I was asked to be part of a pilot program with Pumpkin Insurance. And the pilot was, they wanted to see if insurance could pay the veterinary office directly without the client having to pay and get reimbursed. And I told them, I said, I don't even want to be part of that pilot program because I don't want to get paid by you. Right. Because it may not be today and it may not be in 10 years, but 20 years from now, I'm going to be sitting just like my MD friends who are waiting 4 months to get paid for an exam they did today.
Right.
Yeah, I would rather the structure be client pays a bill, gets the money from the insurance company. I don't want to be in the middle.
That's right. And maybe it's Care Credit's paying the bill and then the insurance is paying Care Credit and the client's got a little slice at the top of that they ended up something. It's got that's really interesting. Well, listen, I want to get on to from our survey. It was, what are the trends, threats, and opportunities? And under the opportunity section, you talked about increasing per veterinary production. And in conversations, that caused me, seeing that caused me to reach out to you. And having heard you speak before and know a little bit about what you spoke about, I wanted to reach out to you, and you really kind of opened my eyes and blew me away a little bit in what you were talking about and what is your per veterinary, the type of production that you've been able to achieve in your practice. And I mean, if more veterinarians could get close to that, it'd just be an entirely different industry, I think. Can you talk a little bit about, the per veterinary production levels that you've been able to achieve, that you aim for in your organization, and what you think, what are the things that allow you to achieve that level versus where you think a lot of, let's say, the median of veterinary, production may be? What are the big difference makers in that?
All right, so we're getting into my wheelhouse here now. I'll say first off, I did not have some brainstorm and create this practice model. I had a practice in Hallsville, Texas. It was solo practice, one doctor practice, and we started producing. And we hit the $1 million mark, and no veterinarians are lining up to move to Hallsville, Texas to go to work. So if I wanted to continue to grow that practice, I was going to have to produce more myself. And the only way I was able to do that is add more support staff to my practice. And that's kind of how that model was created. And that's how our practices run now. Really high support staff ratios. And like I say, I did not create this model. It created me. Because
how many support staff do you run?
So we're averaging about 10. We have been up to 12 and 14 and sometimes.
I just want to pause for a second just so we don't talk over the moment that number sets in for anybody who just heard you say it. 10 practice per staff, and it's been up to 12 or 14. That is, I mean, because I talk to practice owners all the time that are stuck around 5, and it's like, and certainly, and the AAHA study's been out for a while saying it should be between 6 and 8, and they're like, we know, but they still can't figure out how to get there. How are you doing it?
I think the current number that I'm familiar with is just a little bit under 4 across the country. And number one, you have to pay those people. And if you start getting above 20% on support staff, people start getting antsy. When my number's getting above 20%, my support staff number can't go that high. And where's that money come from? Well, the money comes from the DVM pay, which everyone is kind of stuck on the 20% production pay, which to me is limiting production in the country. And I'll talk a little bit about some average numbers. Average AAHA versus non-AAHA practices, AAHA numbers, and these are about 4 years old, 5 years old. Average production is about 560 per full-time equivalent veterinarian. Another number that I utilize is the well-managed practice study that Denise Tumlin does every year or every other year. Average production in those 100 practices that she handpicks to be well-managed practices is about 648. The other number that I like to utilize is the VMG groups. So those are guys that are interested in moving their practice forward. And the average production in the VMG groups across the country is about 805. So you can see those numbers are going up. So my theory is if you move those guys from 560 to not to $1 million, but to 800,000, and you move the guys that are doing 640 to 900,000, and the guys doing 800 to $1.1 million, now is there a critical shortage of veterinarians? Not as much. But the numbers got to come from it can't be 20% veterinary pay production. And people get hung up on that percentage and they don't look at dollars. So I have veterinarians earning about 15 to 15% production range, but making way more dollars than people earning 20%. because their production is so high, because I can afford to add support staff to help them produce more. So probably if you're stuck in that 20% rut, it's going to be very hard to get out of it, because you can't approach one of your associates and say, look, I'm going to move you from 20% to 15%. First thing associate is going to do is go, what? Then you have to have the explanation. Well, I'm going to move you to 15%, but that 5% that I'm going to keep, I'm going to put into support staff. So now instead of 4 or 5 or 6, you're going to have 8 or 9 or 10 support staff, and you're going to be able to produce more. So that 15% of the higher production is going to be more dollars than the 20% you're making now of the lower production.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic, a little slice of a much bigger pie, right? But that approach, I can see that explanation. I'm going to sit down and say, hey, right now you're at whatever you're at 200,000 a year. How would you like to be at 350? Or whatever it is. Well, here's how that happens. It can't happen with you at 20, but it can happen if we go down to here and we move that into support staff and your production goes there. That's how this happens. And you actually are sitting there going, and I've done it. I've done it. I've done it.
And we've done it.
You've moved beyond the theoretical.
And the other thing that's important to mention is you're producing more, but you got more help to do it. So you're not, what I call quotation mark, working more, you're thinking more.
Yeah.
Which is way more fun.
Yeah, it's better work.
So you're not doing things that technicians should be doing. You're doing everything that a doctor should be doing. And anything technician related is delegated, which brings us to a whole nother topic. Veterinarians aren't good at delegating.
Yeah, that's a deeper thing. That's a much deep. You can do some serious therapy to come through some of those issues. It's true though. I mean, the lowest paid person in a business should be doing up to the maximum amount of tasks that their skill allows them. And if you follow that all the way up, you end up with doctors who are doing the thinking work, that they've invested all that money and all that everything. Yes, surgery and mind. And the mind is the number one thing. So what's in your mind that's so important. And that's why you get the big bucks, and certainly skill in surgery. But that's it. And certainly it's very clear that you have figured out the formula, and this is something that just a lot more people, I hope we've whet the appetite of some people here in the audience. And I know we have some prize managers that are opening their eyes, that are going, oh my gosh, that's possible. But more so much of our audience is practice owners. And I know so many practice owners that are out there that are struggling to break through some certain ceilings. And that's always the case in business. There's break points in business. There's, you go, I got all the systems are perfect. We're ready to grow. We're going to add, 30%. And then you add that 30% and start finding those perfect systems now aren't perfect at this level anymore. And they need to improve so that you can double, and those sort of things. But if people want to plug into some more of your thinking on this stuff, and want to hear how you've done it, and so that they can consider how to implement some of these concepts in their own practice. Do you have any speaking, that's coming up, or any things that they could maybe plug into to learn a little bit more from what Dr. Gribble's laying down?
So I do a talk called the $1 Million Veterinarian, and it's based on a survey that I've been giving to elite producing veterinarians. All of them produce over $1 million a year. And I've had about 85 veterinarians take this survey, and I give a talk on those survey results. And definitely some trends developing there, and increased staff numbers are probably the biggest trend that I see. They've got more help. And my philosophy, and I give that talk at some bigger conferences. I probably haven't given it in about 2 or 3 years. I just gave it to a VMG group up in St. Louis. And there were some workhorse producers in that group, and they were doing over $1 million, but there were also, I think there's probably 10 or 12 practices in those groups. But there were also some stragglers that had veterinarians producing 4 and 5 and 6. So I think they got some benefit out of that. And some of the veterinarians in that group are like, we can't do that. I was like, well, if you don't think you can, then you never will. So, enjoy where you are.
I tell you what, you're going to have me now following up with you, trying to set up where we can do a whole webinar and just have you give that as a webinar that we can, somehow make accessible, because it just sounds like such valuable advice that your profession needs and can benefit from so much. And good on you for not just learning and building yourself up, but for being so true to what I see from so many veterinarians, doing the best you can for you and your community, and really being willing to help others up along the way. It's just so admirable.
I'll say, I'm not perfect in everything, and I've always been a top line guy. The bottom line, I struggle with just like everybody does, trying to get that EBITDA up a little bit. And I'm not a 20% producer. I'm not a 20% profit guy, but my 14, 15, 16% profit of way higher production is more dollars than most people that are profiting 20%. So like I said, I've always thought, if my numbers weren't right, just see 3 or 4 more appointments today. Knock that top line up. And I struggle with the bottom line just like everybody. But I guess you can't be great at everything, but I can definitely produce more. And I tell my staff when I'm on the floor, that front door ain't wide enough for you to outwork me.
I love that. Take on all challengers. That is an attitude worth having. Any parting wisdom?
That's one of the questions I ask my $1 million producer survey. Give me a piece of wisdom. So I'm going to steal one of the pieces of wisdom that I got from Dr. Bobby Boyd out in Midland, Texas. And he said his practice philosophy is if he doesn't go home with makeup on his shirt every day, he didn't hug enough old ladies that day.
That's great. That's great. Embrace them. Strengthen your bonds with that community. I really love it. Well, Dr. Gribble, thank you so much for, again, I know how busy you are. I mean, man's running 3 practices, running them at a high level, just go, producing the pants off of anybody out there, just really doing it, and still taking some time to sit down and share some of your thoughts with us and our audience. Really greatly appreciate that, Dr. Gribble.
I appreciate you having me, David.
My pleasure. And to everybody else out there in the Genius Vets community, hey, plug in. We're doing so much great stuff to really help pet owners understand why they need a veterinarian in their lives and why their veterinarian needs to be the go-to information resource. I mean, we're pumping this message out. We've got a lot of really inspiring guests that are going to be coming up on the show. So stay tuned and go check out. In fact, your veterinary practice has a full page profile that's live right now on geniusvets.com. It's true. Every veterinary practice location in the country has a full page profile on Genius Vets. The thing you need to do right now is go find yours and make sure the information's correct. They're free to claim. It's 100% free. We'll never charge you for anything on that. They rank really high in Google search results, and we want all roads to point to your practice. We want to make sure that pet owners are able to find the best local veterinarian in their area, and we're hoping that's you. So check it out and stay tuned next week. Thanks so much.
It's no secret that the past 2 years have been a roller coaster ride for veterinary practice owners. But the truth is, right now is the greatest opportunity of your lifetime to grow and strengthen your veterinary practice for years to come. Business goes in cycles. These cycles have peaks and valleys. Right now we're at a peak, but at some point, there will be a valley. Smart and successful business owners find a way to build a bridge to get from peak to peak so that they never have to climb out of a valley. Now is the time for you to build your bridge. What is that bridge? It's an investment. Investing in your operations, in getting your staff well aligned, and in delivering a higher level of customer service. Are you looking to attract doctors and staff? Do you want to make it easier than ever to deliver a higher level of customer service, to attract clients that are ready and willing to follow your advice and will happily pay whatever you charge?
The key to all of this is truly understanding the processes people go through leading up to, during, and after their interactions with your practice. How do doctors and staff find and evaluate you before applying? What is the complete customer journey for your clients? And how can your practice better support these people in every step they take? Knowing the answers to these questions and implementing strategies to support them can be transformational to your veterinary practice, leading to increased workplace satisfaction, happier clients, and significantly higher profit margins. Genius Vets has proven to be an industry leader in helping veterinary practice owners take their businesses to the next level in all of these ways and more. Genius Vets offers many incredibly valuable resources that can help you grow and strengthen your veterinary practice that are completely free of charge, along with professional services that strongly outperform every other company in their space. If you've not yet scheduled your free consultation and demo with Genius Vets, we would strongly recommend that you do so now. It might be one of the best things you do for your business this year.